speaker of the day, Bernadette.
Oh, we got music. Come on, dance. Put it in your hands. And breathe. Make some noise. Come on. Put the movement in your shoulders. Let me see you dance your heart. And put it in your sexy hips. And slowly find your seat. I have a confession to make. Really, listen in. Come on, lean in. I haven't always been this bold. I haven't always been this brazen. I haven't always been this courageous. And I certainly haven't always been this fabulous. There was a time in my life called high school. And I want to share with you a story of a particular day in high school. The school day was coming to a close. It was the time of day in my high school where we made important announcements. And this particular day was certainly an important announcement. You see, in those days, when I did something bold or brazen, it was only on a dare. And I had been dared to run for class president. I felt pretty good about this until Tracy Wilson ran. Tracy Wilson was what we thought the most beautiful, certainly the most popular, and perhaps because she was the most feared girl in our high school. This is who I ran against. So there I was, sitting in my seat, trying to fix my face. I wanted to look happy for her when she won. You know the look. You see it all the time at the Oscars. I was feeling all kinds of nerves and worried about looking happy for her. And I can see to this day Miss Worthington crossing the stage, holding a scroll in her hand. She'd pulled out the cream-colored scroll, removed the ruby ribbon, and slowly rolled it out. I could hear Tracy Wilson and her mean girls all surrounded with her. They were practically celebrating in their seat while I sat trying to fix my face. She took the scroll, she looked over her glasses, surveying the audience, and she said, "The winner of class president is Bernadette Pleasant." What? I felt a gasp in my body, and I heard a gasp from Tracy Wilson and her mean girlfriends, and I was certain not to make eye contact with them as I made my way to the podium. And I took that scroll and I rolled it out just to be sure Miss Worthington had not lost her entire mind. And there it was. There was my name. I won. I started to feel so many emotions in my body. The nerves that I felt in my seat were being replaced by exhilaration. I could feel it in my feet. I could feel it behind my knees. I could feel it making its way up through my body, and my trembling hands were now really excited. And I think I shouted, "I won! Yes!" I took that scroll and rolled it up and did a to Miss Tracy Wilson and her friends. And I put it under my arm and I ran up the aisle. I ran out onto the winter day and I started to run home. I ran home filled with utter joy. It was glorious. I began to run and I ran the mile home. I ran singing and dancing. I could feel tears streaming out my eyes. I ran playing with dogs and just having my face in the air. I was so pleased. I ran onto Pearson Street and ran to our house, taking the stairs by twos. I was so excited. And as I reached for my key and put it in the door, another emotion started to fill my body. It was quite different. It was heavy. It was worried. I wondered if today would be okay. I pushed the door open, and there she was, sitting across the room in a familiar seat, my mother, blankly staring out the window. I could feel the energy in the room. It was heavy. It was gloomy. She asked, without taking her eyes off the window, "How was your day?" Somehow, in this 15-year-old body, I had learned how to do emotional calculation. You know what I'm talking about, don't you? Yeah. I surveyed this room and knew that the joy that I had just run home with, the joy that filled my body, the joy I so wanted to share, there was no room for this joy in this room, in this house. And I simply said with a shrug, it was okay. By show of hands, how many have ever girdled, stifled, or half-assed their joy because someone that they so wished to share it with could not receive it? I started to notice that this was not only happening with joy. There were times when I was angry and I half-assed and stifled that. There were times when I was nervous, I was filled with fear, and I tried to put on a face of courage. There were times when I so wanted to cry, and there was no time for my grief. This was not only my experience, this was happening everywhere I looked. Somehow, we had all learned to work in this narrow margin of emotional range. This was the new norm. This is what was acceptable. This was what was okay. Anything outside of that was a problem, and something needed to be done about it. I remember in my first marriage, I was a bold somebody, you know. I was feeling myself, you know. And my boldness presented a problem. I needed to be more timid because what it did was create a challenge in my household. And you know, I wanted a happy household, so I was less of who I am. This did not go over well. There becomes a time when a change has to be made. I can remember walking into a dance class, and this instructor stood in the middle of the floor, and we were to imitate her moves. And when I tell you this woman took her hips out it looked like those hips crossed the ocean. And then it looked like they smeared the walls. And there I stood watching her, trying to imitate her. And I love to dance. And this was something that was easy for me to do. Physically, I could do this. But emotionally, my hips were girdled. Emotionally, I was not able to move the full range of what I was physically capable of doing, because somewhere there was a voice in my head that said, good girls don't do that. That's too much. Those were not my words. Those were things that I had learned. Learning to work in a narrow margin of emotional range is something we are trained to do. Have you ever seen a toddler hold back? A toddler will let you know how they feel when they are pissed off. My grandson Ross will tell you, I'm mad and it's your fault. We love that. He's really clear. Children will let you know when they're happy. They use their entire body, they use their voice, they use their hands and toes. Everything is included. But something happens at some point along the way. Perhaps subtly. They're told, shh, too many times. Or perhaps more overtly, they're told, that's too much, stop. And their shame is built around these emotions, and you learn to girdle them, you learn to stifle them, you learn to contort yourself emotionally to work within this narrow margin. I began to look at this, and I decided no more. I decided that I could unleash these hips and everything that came with it. I decided I would go back to that class week after week after week until my hips were crossing the ocean. And not only did my hips cross the ocean, my mind did too. And I thought this was not just something for me. I could see it everywhere. And I decided to create a beautiful body of work. I created a body of work called Femme. In that classroom, yeah, it's good. In that classroom, we exercise what it feels like to move joy without holding back. To move rage knowing that it will pass. We go on what's called an emotional tour because we get stuck in no one emotion. This work mimics weather. Some days there are gloriously sunny days and it is just beautiful and your face is up. And then sometimes there's a storm coming. And you know, sometimes it's an earthquake. But none of it lasts forever. It comes and it goes, and we mimic weather if we will only give ourselves that latitude. In the walls of that classroom, a gentleman once attending my class on a regular basis said that because of a healthy way to exercise rage in his body, he no longer beat his wife. Emotion, that when her father died, she was 6 years old, she burst into tears and her mother told her to stifle it. Here's the thing, as she got older, whenever she felt grief, she told herself to stifle it. And that now in this classroom, she could cry for a few minutes and it would be okay because the weather was going to change. We were just on a tour. What I look forward to, what I so see is a world where we are giving ourselves permission to feel and be. I feel that by doing that, we really get to be comfortable with our own emotional range, and therefore when someone else we see is experiencing some weather, we have allowance for that. We let them have those tears or that rage they're feeling. We don't shame them or shush them or tell them that's too much. We let them have their moment because we don't get through things. We don't get over things. We get through them. It is my firm belief that there are no good, bad, light, or dark emotions, only emotions that need to be fully expressed. It is my desire that one day a child is on stage winning an award, and they take that run home and they want to share this with someone that means so much for them, that they push that door open and that they are so courageous, so full in their being, that they will push that door open and take the room and whoever's in it higher.